USC still a factor in the Pac-12 South Division following a 41-14 rout against Arizona at the Coliseum last Saturday night. We got Matt Lowry on the line from Conquest Chronicles to break it down here at Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football. If you love the game we love, please like, comment, share the videos, and subscribe. Matt, how you doing today?
Doing pretty good, thanks. How about yourself, Mark?
I'm doing well. I did not see one play of the USC-Arizona game. It was on the Pac-12 network. I guess I'm probably representing a ton of people out there. So, Matt, we'll let you get us started by kind of breaking down what you saw against the Wildcats, a team that kind of played a similar game against Washington the week before, where they fought hard for a half, then got blown out in the second half. They go to the Coliseum as a 9.5 point underdog, and USC obviously was the better team.
Yeah, so with USC, it's crazy because there's like three stories to that game. One, as you know, USC was missing 4 starters in that game on defense, as well as with Malapei being out with knee surgery. But the offense kind of was slow. It was a slow start for the offense. But thankfully, they managed to capitalize on 2 Arizona miscues, which put them up 10-0 in a hurry and gave them a short field. Now, we've seen in the past, USC was the victim of being on the wrong side of a short field, and we saw what happened. This time, USC was on the plus side of it. But the huge thing of this game, outside of the blowout, was the amount of injuries that USC had in this game. 6 Trojans ended up going out in that game. Some of them being key starters, and well, I would say 2 of them being running backs, and it happened in a span of, I want to say, 1 quarter. But the thing was, the USC defense, they didn't miss a beat. Sack Khalil, they got 7 sacks throughout the whole game. Sack Khalil Tate, I believe, about 5 times, and then they put Gunnell in the game. He ended up getting sacked, and he ended up throwing a pick right away to Kanani Mauga. And then we saw the debut of Keenan Christian, which I've heard a lot about Keenan Christian and his speed. Again, we didn't get to see it throughout the season because he didn't take a snap through the season, but we ended up seeing him get some snaps, and he broke off some good runs, which he had the pull away speed, which really we have not seen from a USC running back. I say a lot of people say they haven't seen speed or pull away speed since Reggie Bush. I tend to say Joe McKnight. It's been that long. I don't know. It's been a while since we've seen running backs with that type of speed. But it was certainly a game changer. But the huge story of this game, outside of the blowout and USC controlling their own fate still, are the injuries. And I think with a short week coming up, that's very concerning for the Trojans, especially seeing that they're already missing 5 players to injury.
Got Matt Lowry on the line from Conquest Chronicles. You can catch him and the rest of the crew there at SB Nation breaking down USC football. And despite the losses to USC that USC has suffered on the road this year, if you look at the Pac-12 landscape in the South Division, Utah with a big win this past weekend against Arizona State. But, of course, USC holds the tiebreaker against the Utes right now, and they're still in pretty good shape to run the table and make it to a Pac-12 championship game, despite, again, the losses out of conference. They've got an interesting one coming up against Colorado. Before we get to the Buffs, if you could kind of like, you touched upon the injuries, Matt, but it's pretty much of a MASH list for USC right now in regards to where each player was injured in regards to what the injury is. And as you mentioned to me before we started to record, you're hoping to get some more information after practice today.
Yes. So with Clay Helton had his usual Sunday conference call. Didn't list on how long the guys are out. He said that a few of them were going to get MRIs and that the results should come out today. We won't find out until after Monday's practice. But right now, the injuries stand as Talanoa Hufanga he has a shoulder injury, which he was in a sling on Saturday night, and especially after the game, he was in a sling. Drake Jackson, the freshman defensive end, he had his foot caught up in the turf going after Khalil Tate on a sack. He has a high ankle sprain. He was in a boot after the game. His replacement, Abdul Malik McLean, had a wrist injury on a sack, I believe. He came out after he sacked Khalil Tate, came out with a wrist injury. Who else was injured? And then you have Marquise Stepp. Now his situation is kind of up in the air because it said that he either has a bone bruise or a high ankle sprain. It's one of the two, but he was in a boot, came back into the game for one play, tried to give it a go on the sideline, and he just couldn't. And with Stephen Carr, the other running back, he tweaked his hamstring. As you saw on Twitter, he said that it's nothing serious. So that leads me to believe that he's going to be good to go this Friday against Colorado. And Manure McLean, he got hurt during the final minutes of the game. He came in during mop-up duty, took a wrong step and had to be helped off the field. It looked like a MCL or ACL. Everybody got to remember he tore his ACL in high school. So we don't know if that's the same case. This game, it was a non-contact injury. But right now, the only one I know who is a potential to play is Carr. And that's based off of what he said on Twitter. That's based off of what he said on Twitter, that it's nothing major. It's nothing serious. So he may have just tweaked a hamstring that game. He tweaked something, but it's not super serious.
Talking USC football, we got Matt Lowry on the line from Conquest Chronicles. So we encourage you to jump over there and catch the USC Colorado preview as Matt and the staff gets us set for the game on the road against the Buffs on a Friday night. Colorado had some decent efforts early in the season, beat Nebraska at home, down 17-0, came back and won that game. Had a 2-score win against Arizona State, took Arizona to the wire 35-30. Now maybe some of the depth issues and some of the roster personnel issues that they have in trying to build a program under Mel Tucker coming to fruition over the last 2 weeks. It's been a rough go against Oregon, losing like 45-3, and then this past weekend against Washington State 41-10. So maybe again, depth issues later in the season getting to Colorado, as they've not been able to stand up against two of the better teams in the Pac-12. So USC hopes to take advantage as well. Your thoughts about a Friday night game on the road with USC still looking for that first win away from home?
Well, before this game, really, without the injuries, I think this is a game that USC could get their first road win. They could get it, especially with Colorado not being as great as they were earlier in the season. They ended up getting blown out by Oregon. They get blown out by Washington State. They're ninth in the Pac-12 against the run. They're dead last against the pass in the Pac-12. I think this is a game that USC should have no issue winning. However, USC is just a complete different team on the road. Why? I don't know. We're trying to figure that out still. But USC is just completely different on the road. And with the injuries right now, USC really needs to get this game. They really have to perform in each and every game, especially against a Pac-12 South opponent like Colorado. They also can't get caught looking ahead to Oregon, because next week everybody knows that's going to be a big game, is USC and Oregon. But they have to take care of business on Friday. And last time they played on Friday, I think they handled themselves pretty good.
USC fans, trying to prep yourselves for Colorado. You got Tony Brown, their leading wide receiver right now with 37 catches, but the most dynamic player they have on offense is, of course, Laviska Shenault, who's been one of the best wide receivers in the country over the last few years, but he's been banged up a bit, has limited him to 25 catches. KD Nixon is a kid that came out against Nebraska in the second half and lit them up for like a 98-yard score that got Colorado back in the game. Running the football, you've got, of course, Alex Fontenot. He's got 5 yards per carry, and running the show, Stephen Montanez, who has seemingly been the Colorado quarterback for like a decade, having a rough go the last few weeks, as we mentioned, with only 10 points scored against Washington State and a field goal against Oregon the week before. 10 touchdowns and 8 picks, but he can run around and make plays for the Buffs as they try to build their program back up. And they've got USC at home this week. I don't know what the weather's supposed to be like, but obviously that starts to become a bit of a factor later in the season when you travel either in the Pac-12 North or out to Colorado or Utah, Matt.
Yeah, I know in Utah it was raining and then they said it was snowing. So it's around that time where the weather starts to get a little bit dicey and it starts to get a little bit tricky. And especially in Colorado, where the weather seems like it changes every hour. It'll be warm 1 minute and then the next minute you got 16 degrees and snowing. So I think USC has to prepare for any element of the game that's coming up. And thankfully, USC, when they've gone on the road, they didn't have to worry about rain or snow so far. I think it's been dry everywhere they've went so far. So maybe it's the same in Colorado. I don't know. It kind of changes every hour, I guess.
Matt, I've spent quite a bit of time in Colorado over the last 10 years, and it sounds like you've been out there too, because
Yeah.
that's exactly the deal. Because I live in the Northeast, I grew up in the Midwest, so we're used to summer being summer, fall being fall. Then when it gets cold, it stays cold for December, January, and February, and maybe a little bit into March. But there, it could snow in September, it can snow in May, but usually when it snows, the next day it goes up to 65 degrees, and then it's gone. So it's all over the place. Yes, it is all over the place in Colorado. So USC may need to deal with some inclement weather, possibly unpredictable at this time of year in Boulder. You can get my week 9 college football predictions and get the weekly predictions if you go to the link in the description section below next to a Voice of College Football Community. And you will see that I went 14-7 against the spread last week. That will make you plenty of money. Matt, anything else on this one or USC overall? We look to you to help us get set for the games and get the latest on your vibe about where USC stands. And of course, they can't look ahead to Oregon because that looks to be possibly the best team in the Pac-12, and they got to take care of business on the road where they have failed to do so thus far this year.
Yeah, they do. I think they just have to. I think they know they have to take it one game at a time because any loss could really derail them. And I went on. I know I mentioned it on Conquest Chronicles on Saturday after the game. But if you compare USC and Oregon, or not USC Oregon, but USC and Utah right now. Utah's last challenge, their last true big game is against Washington. Now that's the same week which is next week. That's the same week USC plays Oregon. I think a lot of people are looking at that game as the cancel out game because those games could go either way. But everyone is looking at the USC and Arizona State game as the determining factor there because say for instance, Utah and USC both lose to Washington and Oregon. It's going to come down to that last game in Tempe, Arizona. It's going to come down to that game in Tempe, Arizona, where it could determine what happens in the Pac-12 South moving forward. That's just my take on it. But with this Colorado game, I think USC. I think USC can honestly. I think they could get their first road win here in Boulder, but they have to get their offense moving quickly. They can't afford the slow start like they did against not Colorado, but against Arizona and expect to have a short field every single time. They can't afford the defense to bail them out each and every time.
Well, I got to think USC is a pretty substantial favorite in the 7-10 range. I've not looked at the spread. Have you?
Yeah, they're right now, as of today, they're an 11.5-point favorite on the road against Colorado.
Okay, that makes sense. USC, Colorado, of course, the Trojans still gunning for the Pac-12 South Division Championship along with Utah. They've got the head-to-head there, despite some losses out of conference to BYU and Notre Dame. Matt, we appreciate you stopping by, as always, getting us set on USC football, this time a Friday night affair in Boulder.
Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.